Today's Captain's Log, I was going to talk about the weather, in particular tropical storms and how that affects the cruise ships. Because right now we have Tropical Storm Debbie on the west coast of Florida. We are currently on the east coast of Florida, and today was our arrival into Port Everglades for our turnaround port, which means we had 3,500 guests leaving the ship and another 3,500 guests coming on board the ship. Now I should probably say that my biggest stress as a captain is the weather, because it's outside of my control, but it does help that we're mobile and we avoid the most inclement weather because we are mobile. But when I went to bed last night, I already knew that the weather conditions were not going to be great this morning. We were going to have winds out of the south, which means there's no protection when you're making an arrival into Port Everglades, and they were going to be over 30 knots. So I did order a tugboat because that's the cheapest insurance you can get. While I have an entire bridge team that's watching the weather and constantly monitoring, keeping us up to date, I woke up to a message from our meteorologist in our shoreside office, Craig, and he was sending me a screenshot from the Doppler radar because he had gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning to check the weather and make sure that we were okay for our arrival. And his message said, "You're arriving in between two squalls, you should be okay." And the peace of mind that that gave me, I cannot even explain. And I wrote back to him, I said, "Thank you for keeping an eye on us." And he says, "I got to keep an eye out for my ships." Well, to have a professional in our shoreside office that's not only looking out for our ship, but all of the ships in our fleet, I think is amazing. The arrival weather conditions were exactly what we thought. Winds out of the south up to 36 knots. But what was great is we had another cruise ship ahead of us, the Freedom of the Seas, who took pilot before us. And so we could monitor their entry into the port. We could see what their set, their drift is, what speeds they needed to make. Based on their arrival conditions, we can kind of formulate a plan on what we can expect as we're going through the channel and making our approach to the pier. Normally our arrival is coming in through the channel and then going hard to port, bringing the bow around and going starboard side alongside. But because the winds were pushing us to the north, I had a conversation with the pilot and we both agreed that it would be best if we proceeded in the channel and kept our speed into the turning basin, made a nice turn in a wide open space, put the bow into the wind, and then just drive to our normal position starboard side alongside. I did the docking maneuver today under the pilot's good advice. Now the pilots are the local experts. They know everything about the port. The tides, the currents, how the wind's going to affect us at different areas. And it's really nice to work with someone who has this shared mental model. Departure weather conditions were very similar to arrival, but again, we got to watch the Freedom of the Seas go before us so we could see how it was going to affect them. I did order 2 tugboats to stand by on departure because we don't have the speed like we do on arrival. I bring the ship into the turning basin, swing her around, and then I'll hand it over to the pilot to do the channeling on the way out. Everything was great. We dropped off the pilot, and then we had a medical evacuation. So I want to give a shout out to the U.S. Coast Guard because they sent a boat out rather than us going back into the port, which saved us from getting stuck in a squall. They took the patient off, and now we're on our way to Cozumel.